even though we work hard and we put a lot of effort into things and we feel like we're doing the right things, it's easy to feel badly about how things are going. It's easy to not feel successful in spite of all the effort that you're putting in. And I would bet that most of the time, the reason that you're not feeling successful isn't because you don't know what to do, but it's probably because you're hitting roadblocks that derail you from getting the things done that you know you should do. And it's those roadblocks and limitations that I want to talk about today. We have answered the call. We are committed to a greater purpose.
We are fathers. Past achievements do not guarantee future success. We will prime ourselves often to navigate each new challenge.
We are capable, brave, and relentless.
We will remain undaunted.
I have had two different inspirational stories come up recently that I want to share, and I think that they are really helpful in this discussion. So the first one comes from Brooke McDonald. He is a professional downhill mountain bike racer. He races the World Cup circuit, and I've been a fan of his riding for a long time. I used to race that discipline as well and really enjoyed it. I think Brooke is from New Zealand, but I'm not sure. But about a year ago, he had a massive crash and injury where he broke his neck and he was told he wasn't going to be able to ride again. Over the last couple days, I've been able to watch him race a World Cup for the first time since his injury. It was incredible to see how much he has improved and how good he was able to ride since sustaining that injury. It's really inspirational for me when I see people who, against all odds, are able to overcome massive obstacles. Another one that I've been following for the past 4 years is another cyclist named Scotty Kramer. And Scotty was one of the most talented BMX riders in the world, in history, really, for his ability to go really big, but also do very technical tricks. He was kind of writing the book on what great BMX looked like. And he had an injury that came from a simple crash, but it caused him to break his neck and really he fractured his skull and it was really bad. But at the time that one happened, my wife and I were watching his YouTube channel pretty regularly. We really enjoyed watching him and his friends do all the crazy riding and having the banter that goes back and forth when friends are pushing each other. And we enjoyed just his level of skill. But when that crash came, it really hit us hard because we had been invested in his YouTube channel. And then all of a sudden we knew that one of the sport's greatest riders was probably not going to ride again. And he had been told by the doctors that he wasn't going to ride. And his friends kept his YouTube channel going. And they really haven't missed a beat since that injury. But what's amazing is that in the past 4 years, he has willed his way back to riding a bike again. He's definitely not on the level that Brooke McDonald is, but his injury was much more severe. But he came out with a video recently that had a title that was like the progress I've made over 4 years or something. And it just blows my mind to think that someone could be quadriplegic and be told by the doctors there's no science or no answer that will help you to get back, and then have guys like these two who are literally just willing their way back to health. They just push, they set goals, they stay positive, and they don't give up. And I think that that's incredible inspiration for all of us, showing that really it comes down to putting mind over matter and just believing that you can do something and trying to accomplish your goals in any manner that it takes to do that. And it's really interesting because I think a lot of times on a day-to-day basis we feel like we're not being successful or we're not living up to our potential. But then I see people like this where maybe it's because when you have an injury like that, the rest of the world stops around you and you can focus 100% on solving your problem and overcoming your roadblocks. But at the same time, it's like a lot of the roadblocks that seem to catch me off guard and derail me are little. Like they really shouldn't, the way that they do. And so I've been thinking about those guys and thinking about what I'm wanting out of life, and it reminded me of a few different Stoic philosophers that I really like to read, and Marcus Aurelius is the first one that comes to mind, and this quote is, I think it really embodies what Scotty and Brooke did in overcoming their injuries. But it says, choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been. I think that's incredibly powerful because it really shows the level of control that you can have over your feelings and emotions, and then over the story of your life by controlling your mind. And I think it's really cool. Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been. So if you can choose not to feel or choose not to be harmed, you don't feel it. And if you don't feel it, is it even real? That's kind of what it comes down to. And I think when I look at Scotty and Brooke and overcoming these massive injuries, I feel like that has been a lot of the key to their success, is that they have chose not to be harmed, and so they're not feeling it, and they're not actually harmed. They're overcoming it. They're pushing. And I definitely know that this is true when it comes to how we receive people and how we take offense from people, because I've learned to train myself to kind of step back and say, oh, that person didn't mean to offend me that way. Or even if that person did mean to offend me, I'm choosing to be the bigger person and not take that offense. And then I don't feel it, and it just kind of brushes off. I think that this thing that Marcus Aurelius said is incredible as long as we remember to follow these steps and do it. Now, if I look at a limitation as a definition of a limitation, it says it's a limiting condition, a restrictive weakness, a lack of capacity, or an inability or handicap. Something that limits, a bound, or a restriction. When I'm thinking about trying to overcome obstacles, trying to overcome these roadblocks that are stopping me from doing what I want to do, I have to remind myself that they're not permanent. And even if you find a roadblock in the middle of your road, there is usually a way around it. And part of it is like Scotty and Marcus and Brooke saying, choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. If you find a roadblock in the road, choose not to let that stop you, and find a way around it. And I feel like it's really important to note that there's nothing in the definition of limitation that says that limitations are time-bound or all-encompassing or permanent. Sometimes a limitation can be permanent, but it's not limiting all things all the time. And I think that a lot of times we let an issue come up in our head and let us derail us from our goals or from accomplishing the things that we want to accomplish in life, because we're only looking at the one road, the one path to what we want, and not really thinking that there may be many paths to get the thing that we want. So the question now is, what is holding you back from doing what you want or need to do? Is it a limitation that's permanent? Is it something like, oh, I don't have enough money to do that? Well, is that a permanent limitation? No. In fact, even if you don't have enough money to do something now, you could either work more to get more money, or you could sell what you have to get more money, or you could borrow the money. There's lots of different ways to go about it. So I don't know if there's truly permanent limitations if you're willing to open your mind and look around for different ways to do it. But one of the stories that comes to mind with that is I don't know if Jocko gave the story in Leadership Tactics and Strategy, or if it was in the Dichotomy of Leadership, but Jocko Willink is one of my favorite authors, and he talked about this time where he and his team were doing a training activity, boarding a cargo ship or something, and he was not a leader on the team. And I don't know that a leader was really identified for them going onto the ship, but they got to a point where everyone lined up. They could see the adversary out on the side, and they all kind of froze and held their line, and it seemed like everyone was waiting for instruction. They were all just looking down the barrels of their guns through their sights at the enemy, and everyone was just waiting. And he waited, and then he looked away from his sights and looked around at everyone, and they were all just looking down the barrel of their gun. And he waited, and he wondered what to do. And finally, he kind of like stepped back off the line, pointed his gun to the air and stopped looking down the sight, realized that no one was going to make a call, so he made a call, and then the team knew what to do, and then they went a certain whatever direction he told them, and they kept going. And in that story, he goes on to say that the leaders have to be able to detach. If you're always looking down the barrel of your gun through your sights at what you're looking at, you're only going to see so much. And if you're only looking down the barrel of your gun, you're not going to see other options of where to go or what to do. And so that detach part that he teaches, I think, is really important in helping people to become aware of their issues and limitations and roadblocks. If you're so focused on the one thing and you're looking down the barrel of the gun the whole time, then a roadblock can look pretty huge, and it can make you freeze, like they did in Jocko's story. But if you can take the time to look around and to assess your weaknesses and assess your issues and look at what your roadblocks are, there's almost always a way out, a way around, or maybe it just takes an attitude change to overcome it. But if you don't detach, you may not see it. I think that there's also a couple of other helpful things that allow you to be more aware of your issues and limitations, and detaching is one of them. But a lot of times, even if you're wanting to be better at something, you're not recognizing what your weaknesses are because you don't know what you don't know. And I guess the easiest way for me to explain that is that when I used to race mountain bikes, I got to a pretty high level and was pretty fast, and I'd go to the races and I knew who I could beat, but I also knew that there was a couple guys that were just always better than me. And I really struggled to figure out how to get better, how to get faster, and to figure out what I was doing wrong. And so if you look at the smart athletes and sports teams, they all record video of what they do, and they analyze that video to see what is holding them back and to see what their competitors are doing better. And I can say from experience that when I go around the motocross track, I do not realize that I'm sitting down nearly as much as I do. And it's incredibly annoying to see a video of myself sitting around half the track when I feel like I'm really getting after it and standing the whole time. But if it wasn't for that video making me fully aware of my laziness, then I wouldn't believe that I had an issue. So another thing that I think is really important to do to unearth your limitations is to look for your limitations. And if you don't have a way to go back and look at video of what you're doing wrong, which most of the time you don't have a way to do that with your family or at work or just with interacting with people, then you have to do the next best thing, which is harder but vitally important, and that is to ask what you're doing wrong. It's very humbling and hard to ask what you're doing wrong, but it's also extremely helpful in figuring out what you need to do in order to overcome your limitations. At work, that is easier if you have a great leader and if people are really paying attention, because they'll be helping you to see what you're doing wrong. But if you're the top dog, then you definitely have to humble yourself and ask what you're doing wrong in order to learn it, because otherwise you're going to think you're standing up the whole way around the track. And I think the third thing that helps with awareness, so we've got detach, and then we've got analyze. The third thing is to accept what you're doing wrong. Accept your limitations and accept your roadblocks for what they are. And if it's not something that can just be completely overcome, then you have to find a way around it. But most of the time, the roadblocks that we have in daily life are things that can be overcome. So there's a lot of teachings out there that say, oh, you need to set goals and you need to be focused and you need to do all of these things. And those are all important things, but they're pretty basic. And I think the most important thing is to have that awareness of what your limitations and roadblocks are, because then it makes it clear what your goal should be. Sometimes it takes some pretty deep digging, but it's really important to spend that time in that analysis kind of realm before you just jump straight to goals or you start banging your head against some obstacle that's not going to move. When I think about what is preventing me from getting the things done that I want to do or feeling successful, I do feel like there's some low-hanging fruit here that we can take care of that probably is slowing most of us down. And if I go back to the Stoics, there's another quote that I think is really pertinent to this discussion, and it comes from Seneca in his essay called On the Shortness of Life. And here's what he has to say. Putting things off is the biggest waste of life. It snatches away each day as it comes and denies us the present by promising the future. The greatest obstacle to living is expectancy, which hangs upon tomorrow and loses today. You are arranging what lies in fortune's control and abandoning what lies in yours. What are you looking at? To what goal are you straining? The whole future lies in uncertainty. Live immediately. So when I see this writing that Seneca did, it reminds me that a lot of the times I'm not getting what I want because I'm limiting myself by letting myself be distracted. I'm letting myself put things off because maybe it's not as urgent, or maybe I'm waiting for more optimal conditions. And when I think about what it's like to feel unfulfilled or unsuccessful with something, and then thinking about what I'm doing by putting things off and letting it go, it really doesn't make sense, because the time that I waste on Instagram or Netflix or surfing the web does not make me feel as good as achieving my goals. But it steals time from me all the time, and steals that it negates my opportunity to feel that successful feeling and to fulfill my responsibilities, because I'm letting myself be distracted. So I would say the easiest low-hanging fruit is to just watch that dang smartphone. Look at that screen time report and see how much time you're putting into it. And if you're over an hour or two a day, it's probably something that's worth measuring and setting a small goal to overcome that distraction, because that's probably the most common distraction that I see today. But really, the moral of this story and the challenge that I want to put out there is that awareness overcomes obstacles. And I just want to challenge you to take some time out of your day to think, what is limiting me right now from accomplishing what I want to accomplish? And then to do the even harder thing and dig deeper into that awareness, detach yourself from the roadblocks and the goal that you're currently frustrated in, and ask for help. Ask for someone to help you to see what you can do better. And then accept it. Once you've accepted it, you can own it and you can make a plan to overcome it. So I just want to leave that challenge with you today. Think about what your limitations are, make yourself aware of them, and go after them. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the Primed Fatherhood podcast. I'm Tyler Condi, and if you appreciated this episode, please take the time to share it with someone else who you think would benefit from it. Please subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening, as well as subscribe on YouTube. If you want to be part of a bigger discussion around this topic, please leave a comment on the YouTube episode for this podcast. Thanks for listening, and stay primed.